The wind pushed against the shutters of the old homestead as if trying to slip inside and keep the man company, who had forgotten how to need it. Elijah Ward sat at the edge of his narrow bed, boots still on, hat tossed somewhere near the dresser, his hands hanging between his knees. The last light of late autumn sank behind the pines, painting the horizon bruised purple and gold. From this high ridge, he could see the town of Willow Creek below, flickering awake with warm lanterns and distant chatter drifting up like ghosts of a life he no longer lived. The harvest feast had begun. He knew it from the sound alone. The fiddle tunes, the rumble of wagon wheels, the laughter rising like smoke above the rooftops. Folks would be crowding into the town hall now, carrying pies, roast turkey, jars of apple butter. He could almost smell the cinnamon on the wind. For most people it meant comfort, belonging, celebration. For Elijah, it was just another reminder that he and Lily had no place among them anymore. Behind him, the small figure on the rug stirred. Lily was lying on her stomach, coloring the wooden floorboards with chalk. Not drawing pictures, she didn't know how, but making lines, careful, straight, ending each stroke with a soft tapping sound against the plank. A pattern only she understood. Elijah watched her silently. She was 8 but tiny for her age. Hair the color of dried wheat. Eyes that darted fast, avoiding faces but capturing every flicker of light. The doctor had used words Elijah didn't bother to remember. Experience had taught him words didn't change anything for her. Actions did. He reached down and touched her shoulder. "You hungry, little bird?" She didn't answer. Not with words. But she shifted toward him slightly. That was enough. Elijah stood with a quiet groan, pulling off his boots slowly so he wouldn't startle her. The cabin creaked as he moved. Floorboards, walls, beams, everything made noise in this place. But Lily had grown used to it. She wasn't frightened by the familiar things, only the new ones, especially people. He ladled stew from the pot hanging over the stove, simple, fare of carrots and rabbit, and set 2 bowls on the table. Lily climbed into her chair with the same careful deliberation she did everything with. She picked up the spoon and began eating slowly, every movement precise, like a ritual learned through repetition. "Good girl," Elijah murmured. Though he wasn't sure she even registered the words, she ate because she trusted patterns, not because he told her to. The lantern swayed slightly from a gust of wind sneaking through the cracks. Elijah felt the cold gather around his neck. He pulled his jacket tighter. The sound of the town grew louder whenever the wind shifted. Music. Laughter. The life they used to be part of. The life his wife had adored. Margaret would have been up there at the feast, helping set tables, talking to everyone, making Elijah promise to show up before the pies came out. But Margaret was gone now, too. Winter's dead from fever, and the invitations had stopped coming not long after. Folks didn't say anything cruel outright. They didn't have to. They simply made room for him to drift away. Lily dropped her spoon. The clatter made her flinch violently. Tears sprang to her eyes before the spoon even hit the floor. Elijah moved quickly, kneeling beside her. "It's all right," he whispered. "Just a little noise. Nothing's wrong." But she rocked back and forth, hands pressed to her ears, eyes squeezed shut. Elijah gathered her gently, letting her face press against his shoulder, letting her body tremble until the storm passed. Minutes stretched. Her breathing finally eased. She pulled away and picked up the spoon, turning it over as if reintroducing herself to it. He watched her with exhausted tenderness. "You're doing just fine," he whispered. She wasn't fragile. She was simply built differently. And the world didn't know what to do with that. Once she was eating again, Elijah stood and crossed to the window. More lanterns sparkled below. More laughter. The harvest feast gave everyone a reason to gather, to feel less alone. Except him. Except Lily. He leaned his forehead against the cold glass. He should have gone. He knew that. Margaret had always said Lily deserved to be seen, to be welcomed, to have a place in the community. But the last time they'd gone, last year, Lily had gotten overwhelmed by the noise and the heat and the bright lights. She'd screamed, flapped her hands wildly, knocked over a tray of food. And Mrs. Cottle, with her tight braids and tighter opinions, had said something like, "Some children ain't cut out for polite company." Elijah had heard it. Everyone had. Folks hadn't said much after that. But they hadn't needed to. Invitations stopped coming. People smiled politely from a distance. And Elijah stayed here, on this hill, doing his best to keep Lily safe from the world, and the world safe from misunderstanding her. He was stirring the stew pot again when he heard something, an unexpected noise, a crunch of boots on frost, then the unmistakable creak of the front step. Lily froze mid-movement. Her spoon paused inches above her bowl. Elijah's heart thudded once, hard. Nobody came out here after dark. 3 sharp knocks landed on the door. Firm, steady. Lily whimpered softly. Elijah wiped his hands on his trousers and moved toward the door with slow, wary steps. His fingers hovered over the latch. He pulled it open. Cold air rushed in, slicing through the warmth. And there, standing on his porch with a lantern in one hand and a basket in the other, was Nora Hale, the new seamstress in town. The one who'd grown up in Charleston, moved to Willow Creek 2 years ago, set up her little shop between the blacksmith and the barber. The one with the steady eyes and the tired smile. The one who always greeted Lily with soft hellos the few times they'd crossed paths, even though Lily never looked up at her. "Elijah Ward," she said, tilting her chin up in a way that suggested she was here for something more than neighborly courtesy. "Nora," he replied, blocking the doorway with his body without meaning to. "Something wrong?" "Only that you're not at the harvest feast." There was no judgment in her tone, just a fact stated plainly. "So I came up to fetch you." He blinked. "Fetch me?" "You and Lily both," she said, tightening her grip on the basket. "You're coming to supper." He stepped back as if struck. "We're fine here." "No," she said gently. "You ain't." He opened his mouth to argue, but her eyes cut through him, soft, sincere, unyielding. She wasn't pushing past him, but she wasn't leaving either. "Lily doesn't," he began. Nora lifted the corner of her basket's cloth. Inside lay warm rolls, a slice of cherry pie, and what looked like a little wooden horse. Not fancy, just simple and smooth. She held it out. "For her," she said. Lily was watching from the table, her body stiff, eyes locked on Nora's hand. Elijah turned to her, then back to Nora. "You don't know how she—" But Lily was already sliding off her chair. She approached with tiny steps, her fingers tapping together rhythmically. She paused at the threshold, breathing fast. Nora knelt slowly, lowering herself to Lily's height. She didn't reach out first. She waited. Patient. Still. Soft. Lily edged forward and took the wooden horse from the basket. She pressed it to her cheek, then held it at arm's length, studying its shape. Then she smiled. Small, fleeting, but real. Elijah felt his chest seize. Lily's smiles were rare things, like lightning bugs in winter. Nora stood carefully. "See?" she said quietly. "She wants to come. She doesn't like crowds," Elijah murmured. "She doesn't like noise," Nora corrected softly. "People she might like, if the people learned how to meet her where she's at." Lily tugged at Elijah's sleeve. Not roughly, just enough. She looked from him to Nora, then toward the window where Willow Creek glowed warm and gold. "She wants to go," Nora whispered. Elijah swallowed hard. His feet felt rooted to the floor. He wasn't afraid of the feast, he realized. He was afraid of the shame, the stares, the whispered words he'd been pretending he hadn't heard last year. "Folks down there," he struggled. "They don't understand her." "They don't understand a lot of things," Nora said. "But they can learn, if they're given the chance." Lily tugged again, a little stronger. Elijah closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, Lily was already reaching for Nora's hand. She took it. Something in Elijah broke open at the sight. Lily choosing trust, Nora offering it. Hope, small and trembling, standing on his porch in the cold. He nodded once, unable to speak. 5 minutes later, he was buttoning Lily's coat. His fingers fumbled on the buttons, clumsy with nerves he hadn't realized he still possessed. Nora waited near the door, lantern casting a circle of warm light around her. She didn't rush him. She didn't speak. She just stayed. When Lily was bundled and ready, Elijah lifted his own coat from the hook. As he put it on, he caught his reflection in the window. The tired eyes, the graying hair, the lines carved deep by grief and years of holding the world at arm's length. He looked like a man about to walk into something he wasn't prepared for. But Lily stepped outside first. Her little wooden horse clutched tight. Elijah followed. The cold bit at their skin, but the night was strangely calm. The sky was a vast dark blanket stitched with stars. Willow Creek glowed below, almost magical from this height. Nora walked between them, her lantern swinging gently, the basket resting on her arm. She hadn't said a word since they left the house. She didn't need to. The night carried its own weight. Halfway down the hill, Lily reached out for Elijah's hand. With her other hand, she held on to Nora. Small fingers, warm, trusting. 3 people walking into the unknown together. Elijah felt the fear in his throat, thick and choking. What if this was a mistake? What if people stared? What if Lily cried again, screamed again, fell apart again? What if this journey down the hill broke? Whatever fragile progress she'd made tonight? But Lily squeezed his hand once. He didn't know how she always seemed to know what he was thinking. The town grew larger with each step. The sounds clearer. Fiddle tunes spilled into the street. Lanterns swung from posts. Laughter rose and fell like waves. The door to the town hall stood open. Warmth flooded out like a welcome, or a warning. Nora turned to Elijah, lantern casting glow across her face. "You ready?" she asked quietly. He wasn't, but Lily took a step toward the open door. Elijah nodded. They walked inside, and the world stopped. Warm air hit them first, thick with the smell of roasted turkey, baked apples, and wood smoke. Then came the silence, the kind that drops sudden and heavy, wrapping the room in stillness. Every face inside the hall turned toward the doorway where Elijah, Lily, and Nora stood. Elijah felt the weight of every stare settle on his shoulders. Folks paused mid-bite, mid-step, mid-sentence. Children froze, forks in the air. Even the old hound lying near the fireplace lifted its head. Lily stiffened instantly. Her breath hitched. Her eyes darted to the lanterns overhead, then across the sea of unfamiliar faces. Her hands rose toward her ears, a reflex she hadn't had time to suppress. Elijah moved closer, creating a barrier between her and the world. Nora didn't hesitate. She stepped forward as if the silence meant nothing, guiding them gently into the room. "Evening, everyone," she said, her voice bright but calm. A few murmured greetings answered her. Most just stared. Elijah kept his gaze fixed on the floor, on the worn wood planks beneath his boots. He could feel Lily trembling beside him. Any moment now he expected her to bolt. Maybe he should have never brought her. Maybe— "Elijah! Lily!" A warm voice broke through the tension. Old Mrs. Dolan, the baker, hurried toward them with her cane tapping against the floor. She wasn't smiling, not exactly, but she wasn't frowning either. Her eyes softened when she saw Lily clutching the wooden horse. "Well now," she said gently, "is that a new little friend you've got there?" Lily blinked at her. Elijah braced himself. But Lily didn't cry. She simply pressed the horse to her cheek again, grounding herself. Mrs. Dolan nodded as if she understood every silent message Lily was sending. "Good," she whispered. "Good girl." Nora shot Elijah a quick glance. A small reassurance. She led them toward an open table near the middle, one with 3 empty chairs, their places set with plates and tin cups. Elijah frowned. The spaces weren't accidentally empty. Someone had saved them. "Me," Nora said simply, reading his thoughts before he voiced them. He swallowed hard. They reached the table. Lily hovered near her chair, rocking slightly, her fingers tapping against the wooden horse. Too many people. Too much sound now that the hall had resumed breathing again. The fiddle started up its tune once more. Conversations returned to normal volume, and the clinking of plates filled the air. But Lily's eyes darted everywhere, tracking motion, light, sound. It was too much. Elijah knelt beside her. "You're all right, little bird," he whispered. "I'm right here." She didn't look at him, but her rocking slowed. Nora pulled a small strip of soft fabric from her basket. "Here," she said, kneeling and offering it to Lily. "For your hands. Helps keep 'em busy." Lily took it without hesitation. She began rolling it, unrolling, twisting, smoothing, her breathing easing with every movement. Elijah stared. "You came prepared." Nora smiled without meeting his eyes, busy adjusting Lily's napkin. "I came hopeful." They all sat down. A few nearby families watched curiously. The Carsons, the Moores, the little Farnsworth boy with the messy hair. Some whispered, some tried not to, some just stared openly. Elijah tried to ignore it, tried to focus on Lily, who was now feeling the grain of the table with slow, deliberate motions. But his jaw tightened when he heard a familiar voice. She shouldn't be here. Mrs. Cottle, of course. Her voice cut through the room like a cold draft. Elijah didn't turn. He didn't need to. He could picture her, chin high, lips pressed tight, judgment dripping off every syllable. There was a murmur of agreement from someone. Elijah's heart hammered. Nora set down her fork gently. Lily has just as much right to be here as any child, she said without raising her voice. It ain't about rights, Mrs. Cottle sniffed. It's about what's proper. Elijah's fists clenched under the table. He felt the old shame creeping up again. The shame that never belonged to him, yet still clung like soot. Lily made a soft, distressed noise, sensing the tension. Nora leaned toward her. It's all right, sweetheart, she whispered. Ignore the noise. She causes it, Mrs. Cottle said, louder this time. Before Elijah could move, before the anger could reach his hands, someone else stood. Jonas Green, the blacksmith. His voice rolled across the room like thunder. Sit down, Martha, Mrs. Cottle sputtered. I beg your… Sit, he said steadily. You've had your say for 20 years. Tonight ain't about you. A hush fell over the nearest tables. Mrs. Cottle sat. Elijah stared at Jonas, shocked. They hadn't spoken more than a handful of words in 2 years. Jonas nodded once toward Lily. Girl's done nothing wrong. Let her be. Lily didn't understand the words, but she felt the pressure lift from the room. She unrolled her fabric again, tapping it rhythmically, breathing easier. Nora exhaled softly, relief shining in her eyes. Elijah felt something tighten, painfully in his chest. Gratitude. Vulnerability. Something he wasn't used to feeling all at once. Food was served. Steam rose from platters of turkey, mashed potatoes, roasted squash. Children raced around carrying plates. Someone near the fire told a joke loud enough to make half the hall laugh. Slowly, the feast reclaimed itself. Nora helped Lily cut her food into tiny pieces. Not because Lily couldn't, but because new places made her hands shake. Elijah watched every gesture Nora made. The gentle precision, the quiet patience, the way she matched her movements to Lily's pace. The room felt strange around him. Not hostile, not warm, something in between. But people were watching less now, talking more. The discomfort had softened to curiosity. Lily chewed her food quietly, taking breaks to run her fingers along the tablecloth. She found a loose thread. Her eyes lit up. She tugged it lightly, delighted by the tiny pucker it created. That's something, ain't it? Nora whispered with a smile. Lily tapped the wooden horse against the thread, as if introducing them. A small boy approached their table. Freckled cheeks, a chipped tooth, a wooden toy in his hand, a little wagon. He stopped beside Lily, hesitant. My name's Ben, he said. Want to play? Elijah tensed, not because of the boy, but because of everything that could go wrong. Lily stared at the wagon. She didn't look at Ben's face, didn't speak, didn't reach. Ben didn't seem bothered. It rolls real fast, he said, setting it on the table and demonstrating by flicking it forward. It bumped Lily's wooden horse gently. Lily inhaled sharply. Elijah braced for the cry. Instead, she touched the wagon's wheel, spun it with one finger, then did it again. Ben grinned. She likes it. He plopped down on the bench beside her, already pushing the wagon in circles. Lily watched the wheel go round and round, her eyes following its steady rhythm. She made a soft, delighted sound. Nora nudged Elijah. See? People can surprise you. Elijah swallowed, overwhelmed. More children drifted over, careful at first, curious, respectful. A girl with 2 braids. A boy with a slingshot tucked into his belt. They formed a small circle around the table, quietly observing Lily's way of playing. No one laughed. No one mocked. No one told her she was strange. They simply learned to match her pace. Lily let them. For the first time in a long time, she let them. Elijah felt something hot sting his eyes. He blinked quickly. The mayor climbed onto a chair and tapped his glass. Folks, he called, before we begin the pie judging, I want to say something. The hall quieted. Elijah stiffened. The mayor looked around, then directly at Elijah. "It's good to have the Ward family back with us tonight." Elijah froze. A few clapped. Some nodded. Some stayed silent, unsure. But Lily? Lily looked up at the sound of her last name. Her eyes didn't recognize it. But her body leaned into Elijah's side, as if she sensed that something important had just happened. Nora reached under the table and squeezed Elijah's hand once. Warm, steady. He didn't pull away. The mayor continued, "Community don't mean much if we don't keep the door open for everyone." Nora smiled faintly. Mrs. Cottle made a tiny huff. Ben held up his wagon proudly at Lily, who tapped its wheel again with soft joy. And Elijah felt the ridge between him and the world shrink just a little. Night deepened outside. Music rose. Laughter echoed. Something fragile and new began to settle in Elijah's chest. Maybe this was how belonging started, not with grand gestures, but with one child holding out a wooden toy to another. Lily leaned against Elijah's arm. He looked down at her, a soft smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe we're gonna be all right," he whispered. Lily didn't answer, but she pressed the wooden horse into his hand for a moment, sharing it, in her own way. The room around them glowed warm. Voices blended into comfort. The cold night pressed against the windows, but inside, something had shifted. Something important. Something long overdue. Elijah didn't fully understand it yet, but Nora did, and she looked at him with eyes that said, "This is only the beginning." By the time the musicians struck up their second reel, the hall had softened into a warm golden hum. People talked more freely. Children darted between tables. Someone opened the windows to let out the heat, and a cool gust swept through, stirring the lantern flames. Elijah sat straighter than before. Not relaxed, not yet, but no longer bracing for the world to collapse. Lily was beside him, her fabric strip in one hand and Ben's little wagon in the other, alternating between the two with quiet fascination. She hummed under her breath, a sound almost lost beneath the room's noise but steady enough to reassure. Elijah, she was still comfortable. Nora sat across from them sipping cider. Every now and then she'd glance at Lily, making sure she wasn't overwhelmed. Every now and then she'd glance at Elijah, making sure he wasn't either. He couldn't remember the last time someone watched him with that kind of care. "Pie contest time!" someone shouted. Cheers rose from various corners. Mrs. Dolan limped toward the head table to arrange her famous apple crumble, muttering about arthritis and judges with poor taste. Children gathered around the pies like bees around honey. Lily's eyes followed the movement. Not the pies, she didn't care for sweets much, but the way people clapped and cheered and leaned in close to talk. Too many bodies. Too many sudden motions. Elijah leaned close. "We can step outside if you want, little bird." She didn't respond, just pressed the wagon's wheel between her fingers, calming herself with the familiar rhythm. Nora noticed. "She's okay for now," Nora murmured. "But if anything shifts, we'll take a walk. No fuss." Elijah nodded. The ease in her voice settled something in him. While the mayor announced the contestants, a group of older men sat at a nearby table playing cards. One of them, tall Len, the feed store clerk, kept glancing in Elijah's direction. His look wasn't cruel exactly, but it wasn't kind either. More like he was trying to solve a puzzle that offended him. Nora saw it too. Her jaw tightened a little, but she said nothing. The mayor held up a slice of pecan pie. "This here's the third entry. From Mrs. Cottle." "Of course," Nora muttered under her breath. Elijah hid a laugh. And I expect it's sweeter than most folks' words," the mayor added with a pointed glance that made half the hall chuckle. Mrs. Cottle's lips pinched, but she said nothing. As the tasting continued, Lily's humming grew slightly higher, faster. Her fingers tapped the wagon instead of rolling it. Elijah recognized the signs. He shifted in his chair. "Want some air?" he asked her softly. Lily didn't look up, but her tapping slowed. Nora watched closely. "She's holding steady," she whispered. "But she's tired." Elijah nodded. "I'll take her outside." Before he could rise, a sudden loud clatter erupted near the fireplace. A boy had dropped a tray of tin cups. The crash echoed like gunfire. Lily's body jerked violently. Her spoon fell. The wagon hit the floor. Her hands flew to her ears. Her breath hitched into a short, sharp cry. "It's okay. It's okay." Elijah moved instantly, kneeling beside her. Her rocking started, fast, uncontrolled. Her eyes shut tight. The noise, the heat, the movement, it all piled on at once. Nora was already out of her chair. She crouched beside Elijah, moving slow, careful, not reaching for Lily, just being there. "Lily," she said gently. "Sweetheart, we're right here." Elijah felt the old shame creeping up, familiar as a wound. He could feel the stares again, feel the whispers beginning to ripple around them. He hated that he cared. He hated that it still hurt. Someone muttered, "Knew something like this would happen." Nora snapped her head up. "Not another word," she said quietly. But there was steel in her tone. The room held its breath. Lily's rocking intensified. Elijah pressed his forehead to hers, his voice low and steady. "I'm here, little bird. I got you. You're safe." Her crying softened. Her breath steadied. She opened her eyes halfway, glassy, distant, but focused enough to recognize him. She pressed her forehead harder against his. "Good girl," he whispered. Nora placed the soft fabric strip back in Lily's hand. "Here, remember this?" Lily's fingers closed around it. She rubbed the cloth back and forth, then again, then slower. The storm eased. The hall slowly resumed its rhythm. Elijah exhaled shakily. "I'm taking her outside," he murmured. "I'm coming with you," Nora said immediately. They walked toward the front doors, Elijah carrying Lily in his arms. She wasn't heavy. She just clung to him like she used to when she was small, her face tucked against his shoulder. The wooden horse pressed between them. The night air was a shock, cold enough to sting the lungs, but it was quiet, blessedly, beautifully quiet. Elijah sat on the steps with Lily in his lap. Her breathing steadied, the cold helping her reset. Nora sat beside them, close enough to share warmth, far enough not to crowd Lily. For a long time nobody said anything. Crickets chirped in the grass. The faint sound of the fiddle drifted from inside, soft and muffled now. Stars glittered above them, scattered across the sky like spilled salt. Lily rubbed her cloth. Her humming returned, soft this time, almost peaceful. Elijah stroked her hair gently. "You did so well, sweetheart," Nora whispered. "Better than most adults would manage." Elijah chuckled under his breath, relief loosening his shoulders. After a while Nora spoke again, her voice low. "You know, she didn't melt down because she doesn't belong. She melted down because she's human." Elijah stared straight ahead. "People don't see it that way." "Then people are wrong," she said simply. He looked at her. Really looked. Her face in the moonlight, strong jaw, soft eyes, wine-tossed hair, held a calm he couldn't remember last seeing in anyone. "You knew how to help her," he murmured. "How?" "I had a brother like her," she said quietly. "Samuel, born different. Bright as the sun, but the world never saw it. They only saw what he struggled with." Elijah listened in stillness. "He couldn't handle noise either," Nora continued, "or sudden changes. Folks said he was strange, broken, a burden." Her breath hitched faintly. "But he was the gentlest soul I ever knew." "What happened to him?" Elijah asked softly. She pulled her shawl tighter. "Illness. He died when he was 13. Elijah closed his eyes briefly. "I'm sorry." "So am I," Nora whispered. "Every day, but Lily, she reminds me of the best parts of him. The parts the world never appreciated." She looked at the little girl in Elijah's arms. "I won't let this town do to her what mine did to Samuel." Elijah swallowed hard. The wind carried the faint smell of smoke and apples. "You barely know us," he said. Nora smiled sadly. "Sometimes you don't need time to know when something matters." He didn't know what to say. Something in his chest felt warm and heavy at once. Lily shifted. She sat up a little, pressing her wooden horse into Nora's hand. Nora blinked. "For me?" Lily didn't look at her, but she leaned forward until her head rested lightly against Nora's arm. A silent gift. A silent trust. Nora's eyes glistened. "Thank you, sweetheart." Elijah felt emotion swell in his throat. His daughter had never offered that horse to anyone. Not even him, not really. "You're something else," Elijah whispered to Nora. She laughed softly. "I'm stubborn, that's all." "No," he said. "You're good." Nora looked away quickly. as if she didn't want him to see what his words had done to her expression. The hall doors creaked open behind them. Jonas Green stepped out, rubbing his hands together against the cold. "Elijah?" he grunted.
Girl all right?
Elijah nodded. "She's fine now. Just needed some quiet." Jonas nodded, satisfied. He hesitated, cleared his throat, then said, "I was out of line last year. Should have stepped in sooner. Shouldn't have let folks run their mouths." He shifted awkwardly. "Sorry." Elijah stared. "Jonas Green didn't apologize to anyone." "Thank you," Elijah said finally. Jonas gave a curt nod and headed back inside. Nora let out a breath. That was unexpected. Elijah laughed quietly. "I'll say." Lily yawned softly. She curled into Elijah's chest again, the crisis long behind her. "You want to go home?" Elijah asked, brushing her hair back. Lily tapped the horse twice. A little signal he'd learned meant yes. "All right," he whispered. Nora stood, adjusting her shawl. "I'll walk you back." "You don't have to," Elijah said. "I know," she replied, "but I want to." He lifted Lily into his arms. She tucked her face into his neck. They began the slow walk up the hill. The grass crunched underfoot. Fireflies drifted lazily. The music from the hall grew fainter with every step. Halfway up the ridge, Elijah spoke. "Tonight was a lot. For her or for you?" Nora asked gently. Elijah smiled wryly. "Both." Nora brushed a stray hair from her face. "She did something brave tonight, Elijah. So did you." She looked down. "I just kept a promise I made a long time ago to never let another child like my brother feel alone. If I had anything to do with it." Elijah adjusted Lily's weight in his arms. The girl slept deeply, trusting them completely. "You kept that promise," he said quietly. Nora met his eyes. "Not alone." That struck him harder than he expected. They reached the cabin. Lantern light spilled through the window where Elijah had forgotten to snuff it. The door creaked gently as he opened it with his elbow. Nora followed him inside. Lily didn't stir. Elijah laid her softly on the bed, pulling a quilt over her small frame. She curled instinctively around the wooden horse. Nora watched from the doorway, her expression tender and unreadable. When Elijah stood and turned toward her, the cabin felt smaller, warmer, like something had shifted in ways he didn't fully understand yet. Nora stepped closer. "Elijah," she said softly, "I meant what I said. She belongs in that town, and so do you." He swallowed. "I don't know if I can believe that." "Then I'll carry the belief until you can." He stared at her, at the honesty in her voice, the steadiness in her stance, the warmth in her eyes. "Nora," he whispered. She looked up at him, lips parted slightly as if she already knew what he wanted to say. But he didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, she reached out and took his rough hand in both of hers. "Warm? Sure, certain." "Elijah," she whispered, "don't turn away from what's opening for you." Or for her. He didn't. He couldn't. Not anymore. The night outside was cold, but inside the cabin, something fragile and new began to take root, like the first flicker of dawn. After too many years of darkness, tomorrow would bring questions, gossip, maybe even more trouble. But tonight there was peace, and the promise of something more, something he wasn't ready to name yet, something he didn't dare let go. The morning sun crept slowly over the ridge, spilling pale gold across the frost-tipped grass. Elijah stood outside the cabin, chopping wood rhythmically, the crisp air carrying each strike through the quiet valley. Every swing helped settle the things inside him he didn't know how to name. Hope, fear, longing, the strange warmth he felt whenever Nora's voice threaded through his thoughts. Inside he could hear Lily humming, soft, steady. She was tracing patterns on the floor with her wooden horse, the way she did every morning. But today, the notes of her humming rose and fell with a lightness he hadn't heard in a long while. Last night had changed something in her, in him, in all of them. Elijah set another log on the block and swung. Wood split cleanly down the middle. Not hiding, not anymore. As he gathered the pieces, the crunch of approaching footsteps made him look up. Nora climbed the ridge, her shawl pulled tight against the cold, her cheeks flushed from the climb. A small basket swung from her arm. "Mornin'," she called softly. Elijah felt his chest warm in a way that had nothing to do with the rising sun. "You're up early." "Thought I'd bring breakfast." Mrs. Dolan insisted I take some of her cinnamon biscuits. She said she owed Lily a prize for best behaved child. Elijah snorted. "Lily wasn't exactly—" "She was herself," Nora said firmly. "And that's enough." She stepped closer. Elijah noticed frost sparkling in her hair, tiny diamonds catching the morning light. "You look tired," she said. He wiped sweat from his brow. "Didn't sleep much." "Thinking about last night?" He nodded. Nora didn't push. She never did. She simply walked past him and stepped into the cabin. Lily looked up from the floor when Nora entered. Her eyes flicked to the basket, then to Nora's shoes dusted with frost, then to the sunlight behind her. Her humming softened. The wooden horse tapped twice against the floor. Nora knelt. "Good morning, sweetheart." Lily scooted a little closer. Not much, but enough. Elijah watched from the doorway, his heart squeezing at the sight. Most people waited for Lily to fit into their world. Nora stepped into Lily's world instead. "Got something for you," Nora said, lifting a biscuit wrapped in paper. Lily reached for it, sniffed it, then took a small bite. She smiled. A tiny, perfect smile. Nora looked back at Elijah. "See? She trusts me now." "I think she trusted you last night," Elijah said quietly. Nora's cheeks warmed. "Maybe." When breakfast was finished, Elijah loaded the stove. Lily settled near the window with her horse, and Nora lingered by the table, her hands wrapped around a warm mug. "Elijah," she began, hesitating. He looked up. "There's something you should know," she said. "About the town, about why people stayed distant these last 2 years." He tensed. "Because Lily overwhelmed them? Because they didn't want—" "No," she cut in gently. "Not exactly. There was something else." She took a breath. "Margaret helped everyone. She took care of sick kids, held babies at church, baked for families in need. When she passed, people didn't know how to approach you. They didn't know how to fill that emptiness. They were afraid of saying the wrong thing. And when Lily had her moment last year, they thought giving you space was kindness." Elijah stared at her. "That space turned into distance," Nora whispered. "And distance turned into silence." He swallowed. "They still should have tried." "I agree," she said, reaching out to touch his hand. "But sometimes people freeze when they don't know how to help. Fear doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like avoidance." He stared down at their joined hands. "I didn't know that." "You weren't meant to know," she murmured, squeezing his fingers gently. "But you're not the only one hurting, Elijah. The town lost Margaret too, in their own way." He closed his eyes, letting the words settle into places he hadn't touched since the funeral. Margaret's laugh, her hands, her kindness. He had carried it alone for so long. He'd forgotten anyone else might have loved her too. Nora's voice softened. "Nobody can take her place. Not me, not anyone. But folks want you back. They want Lily back. They just don't know how to ask." Elijah opened his eyes. Nora's face was close, warm, honest. "You brought us back," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "I nudged you. You did the walking." Behind them, Lily began tapping her wooden horse against the window frame. Soft rhythm, steady heartbeat. Elijah felt tears sting behind his eyes. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Good," Nora said softly. "Means this matters." A knock suddenly sounded at the door. Lily jumped. Nora put a hand gently over hers. "It's okay," she whispered. Elijah opened the door. Outside stood Jonas Green, hat in hand, and beside him Mrs. Dolan, and the mayor, and little Ben with his chipped tooth, and the Carson boy, and 2 girls clutching a plaid blanket between them. And behind them, more townsfolk, some shy, some uncertain, some hopeful. Jonas cleared his throat. "Morning, Elijah." Elijah blinked. "Morning." Mayor Harlan stepped forward. "We didn't get to say this last night, with all the commotion, but it's nice having you back." He nodded toward Lily. "Both of you." Mrs. Dolan lifted a covered tray. "Brought some muffins." "I made too many." Ben waved his little wagon. "I came to play with Lily if she wants." 2 girls behind him held out the blanket awkwardly. "We made this," one murmured. "For her, you know, in case she likes soft things." Elijah felt his breath catch. Nora stood behind him, silent, letting the moment unfold. People shuffled nervously. No one pushed inside or made assumptions. They just offered space, offered warmth, offered a chance. Elijah stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in." Ben rushed past him immediately, plopping down beside Lily. "Want to see what I built?" he asked breathlessly, pulling a handful of small stones from his pocket. Lily blinked, then reached for a stone, then placed it on the floor. Side by side they began lining them up in neat rows. Nora knelt beside Elijah. "See?" she whispered. "The world isn't always cruel. Sometimes it's just slow." Mrs. Dolan set her muffins on the table. "Poor thing must have been overwhelmed last night," she said gently, nodding toward Lily. "Takes courage for her to try again." "She has more courage than most of us," Nora replied. Jonas leaned against the wall. "You coming to church tomorrow? Folks would like to see you there." Elijah hesitated. Lily looked up at him, just a flicker, but enough. "We'll try," he said softly. The mayor clapped him on the shoulder. "Good man." More townsfolk trickled in. Some stayed only a moment, leaving small offerings, apples, dried flowers, a jar of honey. Some stayed longer, talking quietly with Nora, giving Elijah space to breathe. Lily never stopped tapping, arranging, humming. But she didn't hide. She didn't cry. She held Ben's wagon. She touched the soft blanket the girls brought. She let the world near her. Elijah watched her find her place piece by piece. And for the first time in years he allowed himself to breathe without fear. Eventually the cabin filled with a gentle mess. Voices, warmth, footsteps. Nothing overwhelming. Nothing forced, just life. Nora leaned against him lightly. "This is what community looks like. Imperfect, clumsy, trying." Elijah rested his hand over hers. "Thank you." "For what?" "For yesterday. For today. For all of this." She looked up at him, eyes bright. "Elijah, you don't owe me anything." "Yes," he whispered. "I do." He turned toward her fully, and she didn't step back. Their lips met, slow, tentative, warm. Not the kiss of someone erasing the past, the kiss of someone walking alongside it. When they parted, Nora rested her forehead against his. "That," she murmured, "was worth climbing the hill for." He laughed quietly. "You keep showing up like this. I might start thinking you like us." She kissed the corner of his mouth. "I love her," she said simply, "and I'm starting to care very much for you." Elijah's breath caught. Lily looked up at that moment, sensing the shift. She pressed her wooden horse into Nora's hand, then tapped Elijah's knee once. A blessing, a benediction, her way of saying yes. Elijah pulled Nora into his side, his voice rough. "Guess she accepts you." Nora smiled. "Smart girl." The cabin buzzed softly behind them, people laughing, children playing, the stove crackling. And outside, Willow Creek stood bathed in sunlight, a town waking from a long sleep. Elijah looked around his small home, filled not with isolation, but with life. Lily leaned against him, humming. Ben placed another stone beside her. Mrs. Dolan set another muffin on the table. Jonas cracked a rare smile. The town breathed inside these four walls. For the first time since Margaret's death, Elijah felt the future opening instead of closing. Nora squeezed his hand. "You're not alone anymore. Neither of you." He believed her. Truly. For the first time in years he believed her. He wrapped an arm around her and kissed her forehead. "Welcome home," he whispered, not sure if he meant the town, the cabin, or something bigger. Maybe all of it. Lily began tapping her wooden horse again. Gentle, rhythmic, certain. A steady beat. A steady promise. Life, once small and quiet, expanded around them like sunlight through the pines. Not perfect. Not easy. But theirs. And finally, enough.